The story that I'm going to tell you tonight begins in 2008. It begins in London. It begins at Battersea Power Station. Battersea Power Station was the central power station for London from the 1930s to the 1980s. And I was standing there in 2008 with my friends taking photos of the building, and we were fascinated by it. If it's recognizable to many of you, it's probably because you've seen it on the cover of the Pink Floyd Animals album. It's an iconic building in London. It's a building that many of you will recognize if you pass through the city. The building has also been derelict for over 20 years. We were fascinated by the building, we were fascinated by its history, but we were also frustrated that we couldn't see what was inside the building. So we solved our curiosity in the obvious way. We waited until 2 a.m, we jumped over the fences, we snuck past the security guards, and we had a look for ourselves, and what we found inside was incredible. There were these breathtaking control rooms in a perfect state of preservation. And I was terrified by what we were doing, but I also felt this incredible sense of wonder. Running around in here doing all of the things that you can't do in a museum, turning all of the wheels and playing with the levers and dials. It was fantastic. So what followed after Battersea Power Station was 5 years of exploring abandoned places around the world, places that are hidden, places that we're not allowed to access, places that are for all intents and purposes off the map. And as a geographer, I found this absolutely fascinating. I was fascinated with the notion of space and place, but I was also fascinated by how places become closed to access and how and why people reappropriate these places. So we snuck into abandoned hospitals, we wandered through sewer systems, we saw the communication threads that connect us all, we dangled our feet from skyscrapers, and we ran metro tunnels hiding from the drivers as they sped past. And so right about now, a lot of you are thinking, but Brad, aren't you trespassing? And the answer, of course, is yes, absolutely. Because we live in a world now obsessed with health and safety. We live in a world now obsessed with security. We live in a world where we're being boxed in by signs and security guards and CCTV cameras. In the name of security, we're being denied the ability to make decisions for ourselves. In the name of security, we're being denied our most basic freedom, the freedom to explore the environment that we live in. So London, where I now live, has almost 500,000 CCTV cameras. That's 1 camera for every 6 people in the city. Most of these are privately operated. More broadly in Europe, private security guards now outnumber the police by 25%. And you'll be interested to find out that a 2007 Freedom of Information Act request did not show that there was any sort of demonstrated link between these higher security measures and safer cities. But what geographers have found is that where we find heavily surveilled spaces, we do find lower rates of engagement with neighbors, fewer public gatherings, and of course, less diversity. And you can understand why, of course. When you see security structures like these, you begin to think that there's something nefarious going on in your neighborhood, right? You begin to suspect your neighbors. But less obvious are heavily surveilled and controlled spaces like these. So this is the mayor's office in London. And all of that land around the mayor's office, what should be our most common sense public space, it's owned by a private company called More London. Now, it feels like you can do what you want in this space. But as soon as you step onto it, More London begins filming all of your actions, and they've got this advanced CCTV system where they click on your body, and then the cameras track you as you move through the space. And if you were to undertake certain activities there, filming, taking photos, congregating in groups of more than 3, picnicking, loitering, protesting, although none of these things are illegal, More London has a right to ask you to leave their land, and if you don't, you can be charged with aggravated trespass. So what we're experiencing right now is a wholesale sell-off of our public space, and it's going into private hands. Now, More London claims to be in a public-private partnership with the city. However, last year, without public consultation, they sold their company to a Kuwaiti investment firm for £1.6 billion in one of the largest land deals in UK history. So it occurred to me, what interest does a Kuwaiti investment firm have in cultivating a sense of community here, a sense of place? And the answer is absolutely none, because it doesn't feed the bottom line. Now, the walkways here are all patrolled by private security guards who are almost indistinguishable from police officers. And when this particular security guard heard the shutter click of my camera. He came over to tell me that taking photographs of him was illegal. And I told him, well, no, it's not actually. And also, I didn't consent to be filmed on your land either. And he said, you have no rights here, this is private space. It turns out that if you want to control people's behavior, the most effective way to do that is to make them think that they're being watched all the time. People will monitor their own behavior if they think they're being watched. And this has always been the dark secret of installing CCTV all over cities. People will monitor their own behavior. The cameras don't even need to work. So place hacking is the assertion of bodily freedom through trespass. This is what we were doing over those 5 years. Governments, corporations, and even our fellow citizens raise countless borders around us, circumscribing our behavior in particular ways. And rarely do we stop to think about whether those boundaries that are being raised are ethical, justified, or even legal. So by exploring the city and by trespassing across these boundaries, we make those boundaries visible, and we also give ourselves the opportunity to recreate the city in our image. And very often, the only way to slip this net in contemporary cities is just to do it, because very often it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to get permission. So this is my brother and I. We're about 15 years old, and we've loaded up a bike with a cooler and some flippers. We're off on some sort of adventure. I don't know where we're going. But this is what we do when we're young, right? This is how we make a sense of place. This is how we learn. This is how we discover. This is what we do. We explore the world. But as we get older, our behavior begins to change. We begin to encounter barriers. We change the way we operate in the city. And we think of this as a beneficial process, right? We're growing up. We're civilizing those childish instincts, right? We're learning civic duty. But what we're also doing is we're in erecting these barriers and training each other to stay within them, is we're killing off some forms of creativity. We're creating a homogeneous culture. So cities are meant to be places of diversity. Cities are meant to be places of encounter. But these cities that are being rolled out across the world are cities where being together, lingering and exploring is discouraged. And we really should be asking ourselves, what kind of people begin to form in these cities? Social scientists have suggested that the frustration that many people are feeling about having their behavior regulated in this way is leading to increasing outbursts of violence. And so what I'm going to argue here is that trespass can act as a sort of pressure release valve for people to feel, even just for a moment, like they're in control of their actions, like they are able to do what they like, regardless of whether it's allowed or not. So let me introduce you to a term. It's usufruct. It's an old term. It derives from Roman law. And it gives us the ability to use other people's property or land as long as that property isn't damaged in any way. So in an age obsessed with private property, this seems like kind of an absurd idea. However, we totally understand this concept in terms of rural spaces, right? If we see a hill and it's on a farmer's field, we might be willing to cross that farmer's land to see the view from the top of the hill, and prosecuting someone for climbing the hill seems like, again, kind of an absurd idea, right? However, when I apply this concept to urban space, suddenly we hit a mental block, right? Oh, that's someone else's building. You can't climb that building. You can't see that view. Now, the ability to trespass on rural land was not a common sense right. Trespass in England, for instance, was illegal until 1664. And it wasn't until then that it was turned from being a criminal offense into a civil offense. However, many landowners still stopped people, walkers and ramblers, from crossing their land to get to places. So in 1933, the Ramblers Association rallied over 400 people for a mass trespass of a moorland plateau called Kinderscout. And Lord Roy Hattersley described this as the most successful direct action in British history. It eventually led to the Countryside Rights and Way Act of 2000, which gives us the ability to walk on what is essentially mapped land. So let's stop and think about this for a minute. Private property laws favoring wealthy landowners were stopping people from accessing certain spaces. People thought this was undemocratic, so they staged direct action to change those laws, and we now all benefit from those laws. We have a right to roam. So if I move this structure to an urban environment, and I ask you again, if I want to climb someone else's building to take in the view, to be alone in the city or to spend some time with my friends, as long as nothing is damaged or altered. Why isn't this acceptable? In fact, when we're talking about public infrastructure, like sewers, we could argue that we have even more right to access these spaces since they're built and maintained with taxpayer money. It seems to me that sewers are the most common sense public land. Now, I'm sure a lot of you aren't interested in going into a sewer, and that's fine, but what I would ask of you is that you would consider the direct action that urban explorers and place hackers are undertaking as they access these secret and hidden spaces, a form of direct action that is an acceptable and reasonable response to the closing down of spaces in our cities. So some of you are maybe thinking now, I'm kind of interested, but you've got excuses, right? Oh, I don't have anyone to go with. I don't know, maybe there's nothing in Vienna to find. I don't really have the tools. So just to shake things up a little bit, I left my hotel last night at midnight. I went to the Wienfluss, and I wandered through, and I was about halfway through here, and I was actually trying to get into the third man tour through a sort of back door. And I found another door, and I opened this door, and I crawled into it, and I reached the sewer, and I crawled through a tunnel in the sewer, and then I found this hatch. And I opened up this hatch and went down it, and I was inside the U-Bahn. I've only been here for 48 hours, you know? Thank you. So I wish we could end on a good note here. But I'm going to give you a cautionary note as well. Over the past 5 years, I've snuck into about 300 locations across the world. And some of those locations I snuck into were abandoned metro stations in London, very similar to what I did last night. Totally benign, opened a hatch, crawled down, took a photo. In 2012, I was flying back into London, and my plane was stopped on the runway at Heathrow. And police boarded the plane and they arrested me. While I was in custody, they took a battering ram to my front door, and they confiscated all of my property. They confiscated my phones, my cameras, my computers, my hard drives, all of my research materials. And the police were frustrated with the fact that we were exposing these hidden spaces, that we were sharing information about spaces that weren't ours. And they eventually charged me and 11 other people with conspiracy to commit criminal damage, which is a thought crime. There was no evidence of us actually doing anything criminal. They have to charge us based on intent. It seemed that just as in that private space outside City Hall, the frustration that Transport for London was feeling was that they imagined a potential future threat that they couldn't articulate, and they felt that somehow our photos were going to manifest that future threat. So by stopping us from taking photos, by physically taking them away from us and taking our camera gear and dragging us through the court system, they could stop that future threat from manifesting, potentially. But then I started doing some research, and it turns out that if I go to the website of Transport for London, the public-private partnership that owns the tube, I can pay £600 an hour to photograph that same disused station, as long as I've got £5 million in public liability insurance. Which leads me to wonder, or conclude, that perhaps photographing private space is fine as long as we're willing to pay for the privilege. Or maybe we can conclude that people with money don't constitute an imagined future threat. Maybe we can even conclude that national security has a price. So you're going to think that I'm totally paranoid at this point, and I'm going to show you another document to prove that I am. This document was put together by the National Counterterrorism Center in the United States, and it cites my website and the website of a couple of other urban explorers, and it suggests that we are aiding terrorists by taking photographs of hidden places. I have to wonder, if I had paid to take photographs of the same places, would I still be aiding terrorists? I soon realized that the problem wasn't necessarily with exploring these places or even with taking the photographs. It was doing what I'm doing right now, sharing information that they found threatening. These corporations treated me, a photographer of hidden spaces, in the same way that they would treat a computer hacker, right? They took my property, and they also took my passport. They trapped me in the United Kingdom for 2 years, limiting my mobility so that I couldn't get around to explore places. This is a familiar story, right? We know other hackers of virtual spaces rather than hackers of physical spaces who have also had their documents confiscated so that they can't travel anymore. So in this light, I might perhaps suggest that it's no longer easier to ask for forgiveness than permission anymore. Perhaps both are equally difficult in today's city. I think that information should be shared. I think that transparency is important in a democracy. I want to know what's being built in my city, by whom, with what funds, and to what ends. And I think that those are totally reasonable expectations, as is the expectation that people are going to explore their environments, whatever environments they happen to live in. So when we explore these spaces, when we ignore those no trespassing signs, as I did last night, we recreate space in our image, and we, in a sense, make the impossible possible. So you remember in 2008, we were staring at these chimneys on Battersea Power Station, and we were frustrated that we couldn't get closer to them. Well, after my arrest and after my passport had been confiscated and I was being dragged through the courts, we went back last year and we rigged up ropes on those chimneys, and we climbed to the top, and I stood on the lip of the chimney, and it was absolutely incredible looking out over London. But it occurred to me that there's some bravery in continuing to trespass regardless of what the consequences are, because it forces open that discussion about these boundaries that are being circumscribed around us and whether, indeed, those boundaries are ethical, justified, or even legal. So I'm not going to ask you to become an urban explorer. I know it's not something most people would want to do, but I would ask you to think about those boundaries that are being drawn around your existence and the way they're changing your behavior. And I would like to ask you to think about trespassing those boundaries in whatever small ways you're willing to do, and to think about whether those boundaries are ethical, legal, or justified. And I'd like you to think a little bit about whether trespass might just be an essential component of democracy. Thank you.